Morning, everyone. My name is Kelly, and I am the pastor here at Edges. I'm always grateful that we get together on a Sunday morning. Today, I'm really just here for the party. We're celebrating graduates today. Some of you are families of graduates, and we want to welcome you. If you're graduating from high school or from college, would you just barely raise a finger so we can get a... Come on. If one of you will do it, the rest of you will. Thank you, Shay. Now, Shay is not the only graduate in the room. Graduates? Nice. See? That's worthy of a party. Great. Thanks for being here. This message is for you. Dear class of 2018, congratulations. Please pay attention. Some of you are full on, cap and gown, walk across the stage. Golly geez, I really did it. Kind of graduates. Whether at the head of your class or by the skin of your teeth, you are or will be very soon official finishers of some cumulative intellectual pursuit. The rest of us in the room are what we call softer graduates. We're the class of every day and the class of every year. We're intermittent, less glamorous finishers of quiet goals, participants in dreams that have commenced, conquerors of the regular and the mundane, graduates. In a real way, right, we are all always graduating. We are all the class of 2018 in one way or another. Our lives marked with perpetual and varied beginnings that amount over time to a cumulative more of something. A lifelong recurring process that leads toward conclusions and commencements, time and time again. I'd like for you to think for just a moment about the things from which you are graduating even right now. Things that you have just finished or are just starting. What in your life is commencing? What in your life is beginning? So because we are all always graduating, I guess this message is for all of us. Now, this is not to diminish the diploma kind of graduate in the room today. That's a big deal. It's simply to notice that if there are best practices to be learned for graduating, they aren't disposable. You don't just need them once. They're not of the one and done kind. Whatever these skills are for graduating, we're going to need them over and over again. Now, I think that the Bible would like to cast a vote for the number one skill a graduate needs. It's a skill that we all have because you can't get to the spot you've gotten to without it. And I think the question is not whether we're using this skill, it's whether we're using it well or whether we're using it poorly. What I'm talking about is the ability to focus, to concentrate. I'm talking about the capacity to really know what you're doing and why. I know you thought you got to be done with that at graduation, but I think it's just the beginning spot for that. It's what Parker Palmer calls listening to your life. It's what your elementary school teachers may have called paying attention. Paying attention, that's what we're thinking about today and what we're thinking about over the course of the next 4 weeks. Where do you cash in your internal chips? What deserves your mind and your heart? Where do your actions find their reason in the world? This week specifically, how do you pay attention and to what at a phase such as graduation? Because see, when you finish a thing, anything, at its commencement, you're sort of done focusing on the thing that you were after for a minute, right? Because you attained it. And so when that happens, all this internal head and heart space opens up all over again. It can be kind of an unusual freedom after a long nose to the grindstone process to have a soul space that is yet untethered. What do you do then? To be able now to zoom out for a moment, to decide where to look among the many options, to discern what matters now among a whole host of shiny objects on your horizon. This is new. You have only a minute, just a split second really, for the world to rush in front of you before your eyes will survey and then your life will lock in on what's next. If you're leaving high school, if you're graduating from high school, there's a good chance one thing you'll pay attention to is your career. And you will live with the illusion that you will only have to focus on this once. It's the tricky intersection of how you'll spend your life and how you'll earn your keep. Will you focus on becoming an engineer, a chef, an occupational therapist, a UPS driver, a gap year or 4? You'll focus on something that may eventually become what we call a career. And along with that, many of you will either commence or continue many of your former identities. You probably have had some thinking to do about this. Do you want to be the same person that you were in high school? Will you be an athlete? Will you still be a band member? Will you be a band member for the first time? Will you be a video game player now? Will you care more about how you look or how you behave or how you think? Where will you make connections now? And where will you sever them now? Which people deserve your attention? Who do you want to impress? Who will you let impress you? Who and what will you serve? Who and what will serve you? These are the questions of graduations. Where will you pay attention? And if you're leaving college, it's exactly the same thing. All the same questions apply all over again. And at every commencement moment in life, same thing. All of us in the room are still asking these same questions. What and who will we let serve us? What and who will we serve? What deserves our attention now? It's how we move through life. We are always at the end of some things and at the beginning of other things. And in these moments, we have what is a powerful and a potentially holy opportunity to decide again what is worthy of our attention. I want to suggest this morning what I think the Bible believes is a game changer in the question about paying attention. And I think the game changer in that question is simply this. It's the decision to follow Jesus. It's the decision to be somebody who wants to follow in the way of Christ. Because I think Jesus came to teach us how to pay attention to different things. And wanting to follow in that way is a choice to be invited to pay attention to a whole new set of things. To be given the opportunity to practice paying attention in ways that we would otherwise miss or ignore, but that mostly we would just find worthless. So the author of the book of Romans talks about how our focus is a game changer. About how what we pay attention to every time we graduate, even from one day to the next, is the biggest decision we will ever make. I'm going to be reading this morning, and on the screen you'll see Romans 12, 1 and 2 from the paraphrase of the Bible called The Message. But in the books on your tables, looky here, page 652. That's where you want to look if you want to follow along in the Bibles that are on your tables this morning. Romans 12, 1 and 2, about focus. So here's what I want you to do, says Paul, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the very best thing you can do for God. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. What do we pay attention to, and what will it do to us is the focus of that passage. In 1991, I graduated from college for the first time. 2 months later, I graduated from being single. 12 days later, I graduated from being a Texan when we picked up and moved to Ohio. So many finish lines, so many movements from one thing to the next. I remember when Frank was the reason that I was no longer single, when we went to the U-Haul place. And we went to rent a truck to move all of our things across the country, and we were so big. I mean, we thought we were, that was like the first real adulting thing we did as a married couple. So we go to the U-Haul place, and I was shocked that after we went in and at the front desk, they ask you to record what you think you'll be moving on this form. So they handed our form to a consultant, and he walked us out the back door, past all the big trucks, the ones that you drive, past all of those, and then past all the storage containers that you can put behind your own big truck, to this little lot where I think nobody had ever been before, and he veered us around to this teeny tiny box on wheels. Now, the U-Haul font on this truck was smaller than any U-Haul font you've ever seen. I've never yet seen this truck again. This little tiny box was the size that you might imagine would carry a medium-sized Labrador. And it's the kind of thing that you could pull behind a go-kart or a bike with multiple speeds. So with our tail between our legs, we took that little trailer to my parents' house, and we loaded up everything we could find that had ever been mine. And then we went to Frank's parents' house, and we loaded up everything that we could find that had ever been Frank's. And we started to drive to Ohio, and you could still hear the stuff rolling around inside that tiny box. There was so much room. Metaphorically speaking, I could not wait to fill up my life, to accumulate a big rig worth of stuff to make meaning. My mind and my heart wandered. Everything within me dreamt. Like many of you, I had a whole new space at this graduation moment that wasn't full of anything, and so do you. How would I fill my life? What would I pay attention to? That's the moment where we all are every day. We are always at the moment where what's next hangs in the balance. And we will either pay attention to filling our lives, or we will pay attention to offering them. What it means to be a follower of Christ is to accept the invitation to offer our lives. And those are two different tracks. I'd like to offer this morning what I would call a partial list, a beginning list of ways that often in these moments we fill our lives. They're the ways we fit into our culture, to use the language from Romans 12. And then I'd like to offer to you what I think Jesus says is an alternative, or a way to sort of, if we think life is about this, hold on, if you just dial it a few degrees this direction, you're going to wind up with something different. So first, the ways I think we are tempted to fill our lives, all of us. The first one, clutter. By clutter, I mean stuff that means nothing. And I am talking about literal clutter, like me, thinking about what were all the new things I could get that I didn't have yet that would make me an adult. Things like furniture and toys and technology and cars and kids and all, not bad things, just things that sometimes Not that all of those mean nothing. I just mean that sometimes you can, you can gather, hang with me here for a moment, Sarah. I mean that you can gather things in your life, and if you just think of it as disposable, it becomes clutter. It means nothing. If you don't invest in it wisely, it can mean nothing. And some of the things you were never meant to really collect in the first place. So the kind of thing that you can collect that can result in you just accumulating things that you then view as disposable. And people can very often be one of those kinds of things. The second thing is power. That we're tempted to think about how will our job and our associations with people and the networks that we create. We're tempted to just collect achievements and accomplishments and degrees. And if we're not careful, those can be the things that we fill our lives with instead of the things that we use to offer our lives. Again, it's not that there's a whole different set of things, it's the way of viewing them that we're going to talk about. Another way we often fill our lives is just through consuming the earth. Just what's the next thing and how can we consume it without any thought for what we may be doing to it. Another way we can fill our lives is by chasing those who we perceive have the most. We call this keeping up with the Joneses. Just filling our lives with looking at who seems like they're ahead of us, who seems like they have more, are doing more, look like more. And how can I get to that spot so I'm going to feel like I'm the one that has more, does more, is more? Another way we fill our lives is by keeping our guard up, by building fences, by keeping our defenses so that nobody gets in and so that we don't get hurt. I'm going to pause for just a moment now, and I'm going to let you think about some of the ways that you fill up your life container. What I want to ask us this morning, in conjunction with what I think the Romans 12 passage wants to teach us, is there a better alternative? In the ways that we would use these things just for our own purposes, even children, just for our own purposes, instead of helping to offer our lives with them and through them, is there a different alternative? I believe Jesus invites us to one, and he offered it with his life. So the ways that we can offer our lives instead of just filling them. Instead of the accumulation of all kinds of things that may mean nothing to us or to anyone else, we can offer our lives in simplicity. We can collect things and value them because they deserve to be valued like people. Instead of just running through the kinds of friendships and the kinds of associations that we collect because they make us feel better about ourselves, we can collect and offer our lives with them and to them. The same can be said of things. Some things you can accumulate and gather and use them for wonderful purposes in the world, things God wants to do. But if they are only your things because they fill you, there's an alternative that Jesus is inviting you to. When we use our power to serve other people instead of serving ourselves, that's the definition of humility. So it's not that power is a bad thing. It's not that it's wrong. Those of you who have 6 more degrees in mind, who have huge vocational aspirations, there's nothing wrong with the kind of power that comes with that. It's the way you will use it in the world and for the world that matters. The invitation that Jesus offers is to take that everyday, ordinary life and to place it before God as an offering and see how that will change us from the inside out with just a simple tweak. Instead of consuming the earth, we can decide we're going to care about it. That's the kind of thing you can wake up in the morning and say, how am I going to pay attention to the earth today? Am I going to pay attention by consuming it? Or am I going to pay attention by caring for it? Because we will give it our attention one way or the other. Instead of chasing those with the most, what if we consider just communing with them? What if we considered what communion is like with people instead of chasing after them? A few weeks ago, we were in Lexington, Kentucky, and Frank Ivy and I were having dinner, and the waitress came to our table, and she said that she had recently moved, and so, of course, we asked her why, and she said she wanted a simpler life. So that, of course, intrigued us, and we asked, why? What's that about? And she said, she's thinking, I just wanted to give you your tea, lady. I'm just trying to help the people in the restaurant. So we asked her what that was about, and she said that she wanted a simpler life because she'd spent the first half of her life keeping up with the Joneses until she realized the Joneses were miserable. What would us seeing people as not for our own good, but seeing our relationships with people for the good of them and for the world, what would just tweaking that view a few degrees because of the invitation of Christ mean? About keeping our guard up. You know, Jesus' whole life was about helping people to get their guards down and about showing what it looks like when we don't live in a defensive posture to people. But without the alternative, that's the only way to live. If you don't have something as an alternative, then of course you're going to keep your guard up to not get hurt by people. If you can trust that Jesus is inviting you to a different way as a follower, and that that's going to lead you to what matters most, then perhaps you have another option, a different way to pay attention when you wake up into a day. So as you become engineers or UPS drivers, as you become parents and think about what it means to parent your children well by paying attention to the right things, as you make midlife corrections, as you retire, think about what deserves your attention. Offering your life instead of filling it. This is the stuff of the ordinary. It's the stuff of the everyday. It's not flashy, but it is the way we are changed from the inside out by the way we pay attention. What we pay attention to can be how we practice our faith. Sometimes people want to know, what is it to have faith? What if it is as simple as paying attention to different things in new ways as we journey through the life we were already going to have anyway? What we pay attention to can be how we practice our faith, or we can just pay attention so that we fill up our lives. There is no greater time to pay attention than at these graduating moments, all of them, every day. Amen. And now to those of you who are graduating from high school or from college, I don't want to embarrass you, but we have some presents for you. And we'd love to give them to you, but you can only get them if you come stand up here with me. Because we want to pray for you as well. So could someone be first, and then everybody else, could you just come and stand behind me? Come on. Don't make Noah be by himself. Come on. Now, how cool is that? I mean, to be a church that gets to send out a church that's full of that is really beautiful. All right, so we have 4 presents for you, and we hope that they'll help you to pay attention. And we thought of one, then it didn't seem like, but then we thought of another, and in the end of it, we just said, just give them all. Just give them all the stuff. Clutter. Not really. This is not going to be clutter for you. This is going to help you to pay attention to the right things. I mean, these folks are just going to kind of file by as I tell you a little bit about what you're getting. The first thing that we have for you is a book. It's called Jesus Calling. What's Jesus calling you to pay attention to? It has some daily readings in it. It might be a good way to start your day, to help God help you. No, for God to help you know how you can pay attention in the world that you're going to live in just on that every day. Inside that book, there's a gift card, our usual kind of thing. We want you to go pay some attention. have some time and reflection, we think cups of coffee are a good way to do that. So there's a gift card in there for a local coffee shop that will remain unnamed. We only gave it to you because we're sure that will go wherever you are. So we're not endorsing any particular coffee vendor. We're just saying that we wanted you to all have a place to go and a gift card that you could use. So that's why you got that one. And then coming along next is a candle. We give this to all of our graduates every year. And attached to the candle, there's a pottery chip. It's from our communion pottery. It's to remind you that the God who has met you in communion here is always wherever you're going, and will always meet you in communion there as well. And it's our prayer that you'll find a community there that will help you to always know that as you go. And then finally, in a few moments, you're going to have the opportunity to hear a song. Now, I bet nobody's given you a song yet for graduation. Maybe books and candles and gift cards, but the song is called Paying Attention. And our lead worshipers wrote it to be sung over you and to you, and also in this community, because as we seek to pay attention as well to our lives. So we'll keep on singing it here, and when we do, we'll think of you, and we'll try hard like we want you to live our lives paying attention to the God who seeks to give us alternatives of beauty and life and hope. And now we want to pray for you. This is our custom here in Edges. What I'd like for us to do is, if you guys, you seem so far away, could you now kind of, after they light your candle, could you just kind of clump together like up here? Because we're going to pray a prayer for you. And what we want to think of, community, is what are the kinds of words that we would pray that God would help them pay attention to? So, for example, God always wants us to pay attention to forgiveness. So that might be a word that we would pray, that they would have the chance to encounter and the opportunity to pay attention to. And we'll just say words over them for a while, and then I'll close our prayer together. So if you could just think of the kinds of things that you know God wants for a life, we'll pray those into the space and over these people and over all of us together, and then I'll close our time. Would you pray with me? God, thank you for moments of commencement, of finishing and beginning. Help us to use them with your help and your guidance to place our lives before you as an offering. There's so many things that you want us to pay attention to with your help. Here are some we can think of. Here are some words we can think of that we'd like to pray over all of our lives this morning, especially these graduates who stand before us. hard to even imagine, God, that you could turn us into the kind of people who could pay attention to those things. Would you help us to go and find your light? Would you help us to go and be your light? Because we've learned how to pay attention to where you are and to where you want to go, and would you help us to get swept up into it? Now we offer these graduates to you. We place them before you as our offering. Would you change them on the inside in such ways that it matters on their outsides and in the worlds and communities to whom they'll go? Would you keep on doing the same for each one of us? Show us what the endings are about and show us what the beginnings hold as potential and possibility. Help us to pay attention to these kinds of words. We pray for your sending grace. And with your Son, Jesus, because it's impossible to do it on our own. Amen. Amen. Okay, now take your lights to your tables and then out into your worlds. You guys can go. Awesome.